We're always telling your stories, and it's time someone tells ours. We're humans first, journalists second. We chose this career to give you a voice. Now we're voicing ours. It's true, journalism has much room for improvement, but not all hope is lost, and we want your trust back by humanizing one journalist at a time. We're sharing with you what we go through to bring you the news. The pain, the tears, the trauma, and the mental health struggles. It's painful, and sometimes we even work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But we all have something in common. The passion, the joy, and the love we feel for storytelling and holding the powerful accountable. That includes holding ourselves accountable. So here are stories from us. This is how we want to help improve the news industry. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo. Hi everyone, welcome back to The Awakened Journalist and our special project, Media Healers. This interview will be in English. Catalina Villegas is currently a news anchor and reporter at Spectrum News 1 in Los Angeles, California, market size 2 in the United States according to the Nielsen DMA rankings. She is also a board of directors at the Los Angeles Press Club. Catalina was born in Colombia but moved to San Francisco Bay Area in the late 90s, where she attended to UC Berkeley, earning a degree in political science. She has almost a decade of experience in news and has worked at the local, national, and international level for stations from CNN to CBS, NBC, and Univision. She has also done every single job in the newsroom, from anchoring to producing to reporting. Catalina's favorite beat is immigration and social justice reporting, and her bilingual and bicultural skills give her a deep understanding of the growing Latino community in the United States, providing her with the unique ability to share those untold stories with an English-speaking audience. Cata, welcome and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to reconnect after all these years.
I know. It's great to speak to you again. Before we started this interview, we were catching up a little bit because we hadn't spoken in a while, but we used to work together in a local news station in Washington, D.C. almost, I want to say like 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was reading your bio back to you, and when I finished reading it to make sure I didn't have any mistakes and I had your bio straight, you said, wow, I've done all this and I sound amazing. And we had a groundbreaking conversation because I told you that the previous interview that I did with Carolina Valladares, when I read her bio back to her, she said the same thing. Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about how that felt and what we just discovered together?
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, thanks for inviting me on here. It's been a pleasure. I love the work that you're doing. I love this podcast. I think it's really important. But I think what you just mentioned is something that you're right. We just kind of discovered that in a sense that we're chasing that dream so much, and there is so much competition in the news industry, and you just keep trying and climbing, and you forget to stop and look around and take a stock of what you've actually accomplished. After decades or years doing what you're doing, you forget. You're always looking up, but you forget to look around. And yeah, I loved I loved hearing what you had to say. I was like, oh, actually, I've been in the industry almost 10 years now, and it's been really hard in a lot of ways, but I am very proud of what I've been able to accomplish so far. And that's such an important thing, to sometimes stop and just rest and be happy and proud of what you've accomplished.
Yeah, and I love that you're saying that and that you're recognizing that in yourself, because I know with the industry and the pressure that comes being in the news industry, especially on television, where your image is everything and your physical appearance is so important. we often don't feel like we are enough. So reading back our resume and going back to everything we've accomplished, and understanding that no matter how much we were pressured by the industry or executives or news directors to do more and more and more and climb up the ladder and be a star, or be the best on television or get the best interview, I think it's important to recognize that what you've done is enough, that you are worthy, and that the work you do is enough. And and that was a really beautiful conversation we had before starting the interview, because I think we often don't recognize that. Um, so thank you for that conversation.
Oh no, it was a good it was a good moment. It was a good moment.
Yeah. Okay, Kata. So, what I always ask every single journalist is, how did you get started in this career, and why did you choose to become a journalist?
So I had a little bit of an unconventional entry and path into journalism. I went to school initially, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. A lot of my family is in the healthcare industry. And so I thought, this is something for me to go into. So when I went to school, like you mentioned, I went to Berkeley. I started as pre-med, but I was always kind of sneaking in political science classes in between my like chemistry and the biology, just because I loved it so much. And as the years passed, I said, why am I sneaking in the things that I like instead of making that my main courses, instead of focusing on the things that I like and I enjoy? And so I made a transition to political science. It was tough because there is no political science job, like really clear, right? When you do a political science degree, not like there is with like pre-med or dentistry, right? With political science, there is a lot you can do, but there isn't, some say that you don't have a specific route, right? It's very shady and cloudy. And as I was doing that, as I transitioned to political science, one random day I was at a festival. I was very involved with the community back then. I would attend a lot of events, and one event, this man came up to me and he said, "Hey, would you like to co-host a television show with me?" And I did not know this person. It was completely out of the blue. I thought it was a joke at the beginning. And I said, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, I was a college student. And I said, sure, whatever. And he actually started the show a few weeks later. And so I started co-hosting this kind of variety magazine show in Spanish with him. It was a weekly show. It was all about the community, but it was very low budget because he was paying for the whole thing out of his own pocket, and buying the spots and everything. But he was such an incredible person because he gave me the platform to grow, to learn, and to, spend years kind of perfecting my on-camera presence and all of that. And so I did that for a little bit. And then when I was about to graduate from college, I ended up doing an internship in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, I called up CNN in Espanol, just like out of the blue, just randomly. I just looked up their phone number on Google. And this was one of those moments when I said to myself, well, what's the worst that can happen? Well, they're going to say no to whatever I ask of them, right? So I called them up and I asked if I could shadow them. And maybe it was luck, maybe it was the universe, I don't know what it was, but the person that picked up was Juan Carlos Lopez, who is the main anchor for
Oh
CNN in
my
Espanol.
God. What
And
are the chances?
yeah, no, and he is like an international legend. My family in Colombia watches him. And he picked up, and he's Colombian. So we just kind of bonded over that for a little bit. And, I told him, I'm in DC doing this like internship program, but I'd love to do an internship with you guys as well. CNN is, it's the top, the best. I was just like, wow, would love to shadow you. He said, that's fine. Shadow me next week. Show up, come meet me next week. And I said, okay. So then I met him the week after that. And I went and I followed him around for a day. They were doing an interview with the Chilean embassy. And then it was back to the newsroom to put the show together for the 5 o'clock. And I followed him the whole day. And I remember at the end of the day thinking, oh my God, I don't ever want to be a journalist. This is exhausting. This is horrific. I just remember seeing everyone freaking out, running around the entire time. Everyone's eating at their like desk. And I was just like horrified by like how stressful the whole thing looked. And, people were like running to the bathroom and running back. And then it was just, there was so much adrenaline, and it just seemed so overwhelming. And I remember finishing the day and I said, I don't ever want to be a journalist. This is too much. And then a few days later, they messaged me and they said, we have a summer internship program and we would like you to apply.
Oh gosh.
And I was like, oh boy. I was like, okay, well, I mean, I'm not gonna say no to CNN. Like, who am I to do that? Whatever. Even if I don't want to be a journalist, I'm gonna still put it on my resume, right?
Yeah.
So I applied and I got the internship. And so then I went and I spent the summer interning at CNN in Espanol in Washington, D.C. And it was an incredible experience. It really was. It was a lot. It was definitely a lot. But, after the second or third day, I fell in love with the adrenaline of it and just like how crazy it was. So while at the beginning, it was a total like shock to the system.
Mm-hmm.
By the second and third day, I was like, oh, this is crazy. Your day goes by so fast and you're constantly on the go and there's always something happening and you're never looking up at the clock like, oh my God, when is this going to be over? Right. It's just, there's always something happening. By the end of my internship, I was hooked.
That's amazing. Okay, that's amazing. And what are the chances that Juan Carlos picked up the phone? Like, that doesn't happen nowadays. So definitely something was in alignment to get you to stay in this career because 10 or almost 11 years later, right? Almost 12 years later, here you are. And then so from CNN, how did you start moving up the ladder all the way to LA, to Spectrum News?
Yeah, so after that, I went back to the Bay Area, San Francisco, and graduated. And then I got a job at 2 news stations. I was freelancing. I was doing assignment desk at one station. I was doing as a production assistant at the other station. And I was doing a lot, trying to freelance is really tough in the news industry, especially when you have opposite shifts. So I would have sometimes as a production assistant shifts for the morning show. So my shift would start at 2 a.m. and it would end at noon. And then at 3 o'clock, I would go in for my next shift at the other station. And I would work until 11 o'clock or midnight. And so sometimes there were times when I had 2 hours in between my shifts. And it was insane. I can tell you that it was absolutely insane. But I felt like I had to do it. I felt like I had to grind and work really hard and learn everything I could in order to move up in the industry. And then the moment when I decided that I had to move on is when I felt like I was a little bit like losing my mind. I think I was drained from not sleeping. I was not sleeping at all. My eating schedule was all off because I was working all these crazy hours. and I was awake at times when I shouldn't be awake, and vice versa. And I remember just at times like driving into work at 1:30 in the morning and feeling like almost like I don't feel safe driving right now. I shouldn't be on the road right now. I like almost like I didn't have control of like my body, like really weird experiences in that sense, that I felt really exhausted and didn't feel safe driving or anything anymore, really. So that at that point I decided it was time for me to get a full-time job, something that would allow me to have time to rest. And that's when I moved on to my first small market, which I believe it was market like 112 in Reno. And I started working there as a producer for the first, it was for the 6 and 11 p.m. newscast. And then I moved on to the 5 o'clock newscast, which was kind of the highest rated newscast in that station. And from there, I transitioned to Spanish media. And I did that from Reno, then to Vegas, and then from Vegas to Washington, D.C. And then, you get transferred, you get opportunities open up and things happen. And that's basically how I ended up skipping all those markets. But then in market 7, which was Washington, D.C., that's when I decided to actually make a change for myself. And I quit. And I quit without having any job prospects, without having anything lined up. And I moved to LA. And it was the best thing I've ever done. Mm-hmm. It's been so good for my mental health. It's been so good for my family, for myself. And now I'm at, market 2, and I'm in a good position, and I'm happy. I'm really happy.
I love that. That makes me so happy to hear that. Because we'll get into one of the markets specifically later on, but I think we both know what we went through in that local station, and it was hard. But before we get a little bit into that, I wanted to ask you, Kata, in those situations where you were driving back home, do you almost feel like, because I've read a lot about emotional detachment, and I know a lot of journalists, like I myself went through this, we detach ourselves from our emotions as a defense or protection mechanism so that we don't take home all the stress and trauma from the people that we interview, even though we still do take it home, because it doesn't even matter how much you try to detach yourself from your emotions. Just the fact that we're telling difficult stories and hearing those people, there's an exchange of energy, and telling those stories still can cause secondhand trauma. But do you feel like you were almost detaching yourself from maybe your body?
Yeah, I think I was in a lot of those situations, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area. I remember doing things that were so out of character for me, mm-hmm. and just like things that I was like, wait, that's not me. Why am I doing this? Like I would find myself doing things that did not make sense to who I am. And it was, a lot of it was, I think it can happen, like you mentioned, when we face emotional trauma in the job, which can come from covering really traumatic stories or from being attacked while on the job, which has happened to me as well. So, yeah. I think it can come from a lot of different places, but I think specifically we're talking about San Francisco and in that market and what happened to me at that point. Yeah, I think a lot of it definitely was just everything taking a toll on me and my body and my mental health, to a point that I was doing things that I didn't recognize myself. And so at that point I felt, wow, I really need to I really need to step back from this. And I have to say, it was self-inflicted. I was the one who accepted all of those shifts, right?
Yeah.
Even when I was gonna have 2 hours in between each shift, right?
Yeah.
I was the one that accepted that. But in the news industry, the competition is so extreme. And especially when you're a freelancer, there is no guarantee that you're going to get booked tomorrow. And so when you turn down a shift by a news station, it can have long-term consequences on whether you're able to work or not. And so you have to be very careful about turning down shifts and opportunities and things like that, because it can backfire. And I was very cognizant of that. And so as long as I could, I would accept all those hours. And it broke me.
Wow. And I think a lot of, even though I can recognize that you're taking accountability for accepting those roles, I also do think that we are definitely pressured into doing certain things sometimes that are out of character just because of typical phrases or sayings like don't burn bridges or don't say no because you won't grow in the news industry or everyone would kill for that position. And so we do obviously self-inflict,
Yeah.
but I think we do it oftentimes out of love and passion for wanting to keep so badly a job,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
then, at what cost and at what expense?
Totally. I remember the assignment desk editor at one of these stations. One time I was telling him, I was mentioning to him, I was like, oh, I feel so tired. I had come from a shift at the other station, and I mentioned it to him, and he's just like, don't complain. If you want to be in this industry, then don't complain.
Oh,
Otherwise, you're never going to get an opportunity anymore. And I don't know, it left me a little stunned. I mean, he was right. He was not the person to complain to. And it was self-inflicted, but it definitely left a mark on me, because since that moment, I was like, oh, there is no room here, not just in this station, but in this industry, to talk about ways that the industry is built or put together that it impacts the people working in the industry. There is no room for that, according to this person. And that was kind of the lesson that I really took to heart for a really long time, that if you're in this industry, you're just going to have to, what they say, put up and shut up, right? That's how people say it. Put up and shut up.
oh,
You want to do this, you put up and shut up. You don't, go do something else. And yeah, I did that for many years. I put up and shut up, and to the point that I decided, I have to quit. And I quit my job and left, and still went back into the industry, but more on my own terms.
mhm.
And that made a really big difference.
Wow. Okay, I love that. I love that. And that phrase is just extremely brutal and harsh because the irony, right? Here we are, freedom of speech, telling stories, holding the powerful accountable, and then inside of the news industry, they're telling us to shut up and put up, when we're supposed to also be advocating for ourselves. But it's not often well received in certain newsrooms when journalists start expressing their needs and what needs to be done to help the news industry improve as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like one of the only news stations that's really been cognizant of the toll that journalism takes on us, or has been open to hearing me out, has been open to my suggestions, my ideas, my concerns, has been the current news station that I'm working at. And I sing its high praises because I feel like my life and my career has changed thanks to this particular news station. And I'm not going to name them, but I really, really am very happy where I am now.
Yeah. I mean, feel free to name them if you feel comfortable naming them. And if you don't, that's fine too. But um, I think there needs to be given merit where it is deserved. And
Yeah.
I definitely don't encourage public shaming in the podcast. So, um, but I think um, that if there's anything I've learned also through my career is to be grateful for those news directors or those stations that are actually open to helping us take care of our well-being because we often don't do it ourselves to be able to get the job done as best we can.
Oh, totally, totally. I think we're so busy with everything as journalists, especially if you're an MMJ, that um, you take care of yourself last. Quite often, while I was an MMJ in all these markets that I mentioned, I wouldn't eat the whole day. I wouldn't go to the bathroom the whole day. There was no break. There was nothing. I was just running the entire time to meet my deadline. And so it really does take someone to, I mean, it would be fantastic for you to be able to say, hey, hold up, no, I'm going to take my break. You know, but sometimes it does take someone from the outside to recognize that, especially when we have been in an industry that has conditioned us to work through our breaks, work, in late into the night in dangerous situations. So having allies that look out for you, tell you, hey, do you need a few days off? Do you need to take some time, make sure you get your lunch break, stuff like that. It is really helpful.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. Um, Gata, what do you think has been? Oh, well, actually, I was going to make a point to what you said about the restroom before I ask you your next question. And just, I know this might be or sound like a lot of information or too much information, but um, it is true that often we don't have time for bathroom breaks or we just
Yes.
don't take bathroom breaks because simply we can't, and there's a breaking news cycle or whatever the scenario. But I've noticed speaking to a lot of journalists, we often go through a lot of yeast infections or urinary tract infections because of not having time to use the restroom. So definitely take care of yourselves.
That is horrific. Thank
Yeah.
God I have not had to deal with that, but I have friends that carry around um, basically jars in their cars, so they have a chance to go to the bathroom where they're in a place that they can't go to the bathroom. And this was particularly, it's always been an issue, but was
Yeah.
particularly a problem, at least it was for me, when the pandemic hit
Hmm.
and everything shut down.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you were out doing a story, but you couldn't get into a grocery store because there were lines outside.
Hmm.
You couldn't go into gas stations. Everyone had closed their bathrooms. Everyone had closed access to bathrooms. And I remember specifically those first few months, whenever I had to do a story out in the field for a long time, I really struggled
Yeah.
finding a place to go to the bathroom. And that, you know, that part of it is tough, and no one really talks about that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, when COVID started, I remember the last news station that I worked for too. I actually had to express that I was having issues finding restrooms because everything was closed,
Yeah.
and it got to a point where I was considering or on like taking water bottles just to see like if I couldn't find an open restroom, like I was gonna have to use the water bottle, and it sounds terrible, but it's the truth. And they were so good at putting together places that were open and calling them to ask them if they would allow us to use the restrooms.
That's
So that
awesome.
was extremely helpful. And I also, on that note, because I did end up suffering from UTIs during that time and during COVID,
Mm.
So that was really intense. But on that note, I also remember at one point in my career reading a headline um, where I think it was a photographer was fired from his job because he was caught pooping in a backyard. And again, too much information, but like now that I'm thinking back on this situation and what I've been through and what other journalists have expressed to me, I'm wondering, one, I need to find this photographer to interview him, and two, it just shows the reality of situations and what happens on the job sometimes. And it's unfortunate that, you know, he was fired. um I understand it's super inappropriate, but when, I mean, really, when you have to go, you have to go.
Yeah,
Like, what else are you gonna do?
yeah, no, totally, totally.
So I know that's it's that's a lot. It's a lot to share. But I read it, you know, I and it's true. And I feel so bad that that photog was fired. I now I need to figure out who it was. Um, but on another note, on a lighter note, what, well, or not lighter, but on another note, what has been one of the most challenging situations that you faced in your career?
Whew.
I know. And that, listen, sometimes we don't even need words to express it. Just a simple facial expression just says it all. But yeah.
Yeah. Where to start? There's been a lot of really challenging moments and situations. I think one of the things that's been the most challenging, that is still a huge challenge, is not having holidays.
Hmm.
For me, that is huge. That is the one thing that literally makes me think of quitting the news industry. That is like the one thing that it's like, I can't spend all these holidays away from my family.
Yeah.
I have family in San Francisco, and then the rest of my family is in Colombia. And it's tough because I have to literally beg for every single holiday. And I'm not saying that I should get all the holidays, because I know that everyone else in the newsroom also wants the holidays. So
Yeah.
it's more just of the way the industry works, that every day that there is news, and every day we must cover it, and there's no day off, there's no stopping. And so the holidays has been, I think, the one thing that has been the hardest for me to deal with. That's been a constant since I started. And I still really, really struggle with it. Every time the holidays come around, I get really happy. I love the holidays. I love the holidays. But it's always this like heartbreaking few weeks, because in the last 10 years that I've been in this industry, I think I've been able to spend them with my family in Colombia like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And that to me is just heart-wrenching. And it's so tough to deal with. And I feel like it's not really talked about a whole lot. I feel like a lot of folks have, the more traditional 9 to 5s, and they have holidays and they have weekends, and I've worked nights and weekends for many years, and holidays, and that part is still something that, despite the fact that I am at an incredible news station now that supports me and that I feel really happy to be at, it's just a challenge of the industry in itself, that it's constant and it's every day, and that no matter what, however long I do this, there are going to be a lot of missed birthdays, missed weddings, missed um, baby showers and births and Christmases, and all of those things that are just so important and fundamental to who I am as a person.
And it's so sad. It's so
It's
sad.
literally heartbreaking. And if we talk about it more, I will start crying. I will start bawling, because that is the hardest thing for me. And I just, yeah, it's really tough.
I know, and I hear you, and I understand it completely because every time we had to choose when we were in DC between Christmas or New Year's, I was like, I mean, well, Christmas I'll be with my niece and nephew, but New Year's and it's just yeah, it's brutal that we have to choose. And I'm sorry that you're still going through that because I understand how difficult it is. And I was actually watching a video the other day, and I was like, this is so true. I need to, start talking about this or spread awareness on this. But this girl, I can't remember who it was, but she was saying, like, at your job, when you are getting ready to request vacation days, it should be it should be noted on the email as vacation awareness instead of a vacation request. It's like, if I've been at this company for this long, I'm just making you aware this is when I'm going to take my time off. You don't get to decide when I'm going to take my time off. And I was like, yes, vacation awareness, it's not vacation request.
That,
um so
that would
let's
be
start
amazing.
advocating for that vacation awareness in newsrooms. And maybe newsrooms should consider not giving newscasts on holidays. I mean, hey,
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that newsrooms should do. I mean, I'm not the president of any news organization, but um, I really think that they should. I really think that they should, that they can run a pre-recorded program with, it doesn't have to repeat. It could be a pre-recorded new um, content about good things that are happening out to the community, on this Christmas season. It can still have newsy elements. It can still, it can still serve the community, inform the people without having to put journalists in these really tough positions of, oh, it's Christmas, it's my child's first Christmas, and I'm not going to spend it with him or her, right? That's heartbreaking. And for a newscast that literally the moment that it's over and you have to go build the next one, right?
yeah,
Um,
and
it's
nobody
tough.
remembers it. I
No.
mean, you can ask your audience, they'll probably not remember it. you know
And
so
who's watching news, hard news, on Christmas Day? A lot of people aren't. They're probably watching Christmas movies. And if they are watching news, they probably want something a little lighter, probably something that talks a little more about their community and interesting, cool things that are happening. So, yeah, I mean, I really think that the news industry, in my humble opinion, I'm not speaking for any organization or anyone, but I would love to see the news industry just maybe take a step back a little bit and give journalists a little bit more grace and a little bit more leeway
yeah,
and a little bit more space to take care of their mental health through giving them holidays, through allowing them to take mental health days when they need it, paying for therapy after they've witnessed or covered traumatic events. There's so much that newsrooms can do, but I feel like we're so far from that, Emmy, because as it stands right now, newsrooms are not even at the point where they're trying to fix the problem. Right now, they're causing the problem, right? So they're a long ways away from being able to like help us fix the problem. Right now, a lot of newsrooms are the cause of so much pain and strife. So it's a process, I suppose.
and I think that as long as those newsrooms don't take measures and accountability and matters into their own hands to help ameliorate the problem, you're just gonna have burnt out journalists who can't fully deliver to their best potential. And that's not only putting in jeopardy journalists' health, emotionally, mentally, and physically, but it's also unfair and unjust with our audience because they're probably not getting really valuable information or really valuable packages because you have people working feeling completely defeated. Because I
Yeah.
know I felt completely defeated in multiple times in my career.
I think it's such a contradiction because I think it's such a contradiction the way that we are viewed by the public and the way that we're viewed by a lot of news organizations. So the public views us as these leaders in the community. They think that our job is really glamorous and that it pays well, which we know it does not.
Yeah.
Um, that, they think that we have these, this kind of all this access and all this power. And then you walk into the newsroom and then oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes the way you're treated in newsrooms is you are disposable.
Mhm.
And we don't really care if you are sick, tired, if you're struggling mentally, if you had a chance to eat or go to the bathroom, we don't care. You are disposable. And it's so it's so weird to have that in your mind, to be treated in such different ways by different people. um I really do have to say there are some stations that are improving and that are trying their best and that are trying to give journalists spaces and opportunities and are trying to pay them much better wages or fairer wages. But for now, a lot of the industry is on the other end, and they're trying to, at least it feels like from a journalist, squeeze us for all we can give. And eventually, we just break.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's honestly in harsher terms, but very true and real and transparent exploitation. I mean,
Mhm,
plainly said.
mhm.
Um, Maybe not in every single newsroom, but in a lot of newsrooms, and not only in the United States, but across the world.
Yeah.
With that said, 'cause I think we've talked harshly enough about the industry. Let's jump into the very rewarding moments that come with being in news. I think we hit the hammer on the nail, right?
Yeah.
If any news executive or directors listening to this, I'm sorry, but thank you for
Well,
hopefully listening.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I hope they are listening because I think I want them to know that there are better ways to do this and that you don't have to squeeze every living breath out of your journalist to get good content, to get a good product, to get good ratings, to get good stories. You don't have to do that. You really don't. I'm a testament of that. I'm in a place right now where I feel like I'm doing the most rewarding work I've ever been able to do. I'm telling stories that no one else has the time to tell. I'm being given a space and a platform that I never thought I'd had. I am surrounded by people that appreciate me and appreciate my talents, where I feel respected and I feel um, and I feel like my talent is recognized. And it's all being done, and I just don't think it has to be that way. I feel like we can really figure out better ways to work and to support each other, and the content can be even better and the ratings can be even better, as long as we're focused on making sure that the people in the newsrooms, from the phone talk to the assignment desk to the anchors and the reporters, that everyone feels like they can voice their concerns, like they can give suggestions, like they aren't disposable, like they're valued and appreciated. And I feel like when that happens, your content is going to get better. I know that when I was working in newsrooms where I felt like I was being treated really unfairly, I myself turned into a person that I didn't really recognize. I became really catty. I became really critical of others. I was on edge constantly. I would fight with my coworkers. And I remember when I was kind of deep down in those moments, I kept thinking to myself, oh my God, am I just like a terrible coworker? Am I just someone who like, it's just terrible to work with me? Am I just a bad person? I remember thinking about that and just thinking, gosh, this is bad, this is terrible. But I would just be in just like on edge constantly and fighting a lot. And then, I realized, when you don't feed zoo animals and then you throw in a piece of meat, they're going to fight to the death. And I felt like oftentimes in these newsrooms, I felt like I was fighting to the death. I felt like we were starved of resources, we were starved of salaries, we were starved of recognition and appreciation, we were starved of dignity. And then how do you not expect us then to be fighting and to be catty and to be on edge and to have these really toxic working environments? After I left my job and I decided to quit and I moved to LA and I started a new job, I realized, oh, that wasn't me. It wasn't me. That's not me at all, actually. And I'm in a place now where my coworkers love me and I love my coworkers and we support each other, and I'm friends with all of them, and I haven't had a single fight or discussion with any one of them. It's it's a wonderful supportive environment, and I am not that person that I thought I was. It was the environment that had turned me into this human that I didn't even recognize. And I'm so glad I left that, because it wasn't me and it was kind of eating me alive.
Wow. Um, I think I couldn't have worded it better myself. And for what it's worth, I worked with you during those times.
Yeah.
And you were one of my favorite persons in the newsroom, if not my favorite person in the newsroom. Unfortunately, we didn't see each other enough because you were anchoring and I was a reporter on the field. Um, but I just remember I always felt so supported by you when I was struggling in that newsroom, because you understood we were starved of resources and everything else. Um, and the environment was just, oh, I was very miserable, but at the
Mhm,
same time, often telling stories that gave me, I think, strength to
mhm,
continue surviving, because
mhm,
that's what I was doing back then, surviving.
mhm.
So, um, Kata, I guess, to finish this podcast, I only have two more questions for you, but one, um, one incident or one story or something that has truly made you feel proud of the work that you've done as a journalist.
There's been a few, thank God. And they've happened now more that I've been able to focus on my job and on telling stories that I think are important, and on doing content that I really feel like is truly worthy of people's time. And there's been two that have really stuck with me. There was one, I did a feature on this Inglewood restaurant that was struggling a lot during the pandemic, and basically they couldn't even afford food anymore to keep their pantry full. And so this restaurant was on the brink of collapse. And I went and I covered the story, and I became friends with the owner, and I featured them. And I got a call from her like 2 days later, and she said, "You have no idea what just happened." And I'm like, "What happened?" She said, "Well, someone just came by and dropped off an envelope with $15,000, and we're going to be able to make it through the pandemic. And the restaurant's still open today." And that is just felt amazing. I felt like, wow, like here was like a direct line. You know what I mean? So hard. Sometimes it's so hard to know what kind of impact we have,
Mhm.
but it was so wonderful to feel like, hey, I did something good after all these years of work and doing stories and stuff. Here is a direct correlation. And just a few weeks ago, something similar happened again with another person I featured. She was a mother, single mother of 5 kids. She works at a swap meet vending. Her youngest child has Down syndrome. And so this is a family with a lot of needs. And she kept telling me, the last thing I want to do is go back to vending on the street. But that's in fact what she was going to have to do, because they were shutting down the swap meet. And so she told me, "I'm so scared and so terrified of going back on the street, because when you're on the street, they rob you, they beat you, I have kids. What am I supposed to do with my kids if I'm trying to vend on the street?" So I did a story on her. I featured her and her struggles, and kind of this uncertainty of what she was going to do. And a few days later she called me. She said, "You're never going to guess what happened. um 2 women showed up and gave me a check for $20,000." And this mother who's like, has 5 kids, single mother, she vends for a living, she works 7 days a week, 9 to 8 p.m. Just got this really enormous gift that's going to allow her to now spend a little bit more time with her family, to provide all the resources that she needs for her kids, for her special needs child. And that was a really happy moment for me as well. And so it's stories like those that I'm like, this is cool. This is why I like to do this job.
This is so worth it. Wow. And how admirable that you were able to accomplish that through your work and through storytelling. It's so empowering and it's so beautiful. And it's so wonderful to see how the community often, comes together or simply takes a step to help change somebody's life. And you did that. Your story did that. Your work did that. That's amazing. I got the chills, when you told me both of the stories, I got the chills. Um, Kata, and lastly, I always ask journalists what they'd like to improve about the news industry, but I think we um, got to a very crucial point. We are now saying we are, what is it? Vacation awareness. We're not
Right.
just
Yes.
vacation. It is
Yes.
vacation awareness.
I'm
So
gonna send
quality.
some of those forms coming up in the next. Now that I know that I don't have to request it.
I know, right? Wouldn't that be nice? Universe, please help
Wonderful.
us literally make that happen. um, Kata, it's been so nice speaking to you. And I'm so glad we connected again. And I'm so glad you are in a better place now, in a better station, where you feel supported and where you're doing meaningful work.
Thank you so much, Emmy. I really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. And it's been so, so great catching up.
Alrighty, I'll see you next time.
Okay, love. Bye.
Journalists, this one's for you, to help you heal, to help you understand your worth, and to help you know you're not alone. So share the love and subscribe to Spotify and YouTube, and follow us on Instagram, The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo.